are back with episode 8 of the Breakeven Brothers podcast. I am Bennett Bernard, and my co-host, as always, Bradley Bernard. How are you doing today, Brad?
Doing okay. A little bit busy with the life situation, but feeling good. I did sign a job offer, so I think the last time we chatted, it was getting closer to that. So I'll have more to share today. But yeah, feeling good. I feel like a weight's kind of off my chest moving forward with that offer, and then lots of life stuff in the pipeline. But yeah, overall, feeling very relieved and excited. I don't start yet in about a month, but yeah, very looking forward to that. How about you?
Yeah, good. Been super busy. I think both you and I have been super busy for just different reasons. Of course, you doing interviewing, and then me just with my regular kids got stuff going on, all these extracurriculars, and then just my regular 9 to 5 being more like a 9 to 7. So yeah, just been super busy. But sometimes it's good to be busy. But yeah, I empathize with you a lot because interviewing and getting job offers and figuring out what you want to do. It's been a while since I've had to do that, and it's just I remember it being it's exciting, but it's also stressful. It takes a lot out of you. You're always preparing. You're on camera all day, and it's like you have to present yourself a certain way. So I can see why you'd be happy to be done with that for sure.
Yeah, first free time I've had in a while, so that's been great. I think last we talked was heading to Laracon, trying to figure out what to do there. So yeah, came back from Laracon. Was a really fun event. Met a ton of cool people. So I talked to people on Twitter and just, kind of the normal reply guy stuff where they're building cool stuff. I'm just trying to see what they're up to, talking with them. So when I went into Laracon, I was very much trying to go talk to those people I had, mentioned or talked to on Twitter, and probably met at least, I don't know, 8 to 10 people. And maybe that's not great for some listeners, but for me, trying to put myself out there as like one person, that's pretty good. Had some really cool talks on day one, lots of action packed in the schedule. Then there's kind of the after dark event, which Laracon usually has, just that one day after day one, that one event after day one, really to get people together that's outside of the conference venue. And so there are lots of good conversations. I also met up with some people I'd met in the previous Laracon, which is cool. So I didn't come there kind of not knowing anybody. I had kind of a small community. Then I had the Twitter community. Then I had these people that I was like, I really want to go talk to them and see what they're up to. So happy to report back that it was a fun event, tons of activities, a lot of great food. It was in Dallas and downtown, pretty hot, but had good tacos, had good barbecue. Surprisingly, had pretty good Indian food too. Wrapped things up, met a ton of people. And yeah, it was a fun time. Absolutely recommend to go to the Laracon conference. It's lots of good people. That the vibes and the energy are right.
That's cool. Yeah, there's 2 conferences that I think I mentioned on previous podcasts that I'm looking at potentially going to. One is here in the Phoenix area, which is great. And it's like the Mortgage Bankers Association Accounting and Finance Conference. So I'm thinking about doing that one. And then the other one, it's like right around the same time, I think, which is also, I don't know if they're the exact same dates, but they're pretty close together, is the Digital CPA conference in Denver through like the AICPA, the American Institute of CPAs. So very different content, but still like accounting related. And yeah, definitely itching to go. The Phoenix one, of course, is easier. It being local to where I am, it's easier to go for. But to be all honest, I kind of would rather go to the digital CPA one just because I feel like I've done the mortgage bankers one a couple times now, I think 2 or 3 times. So it's still great. It's great to network with people, but like it won't be as fresh as the digital CPA one, I think.
Who has the better community?
Oh, that's a great question. I don't want to disparage anybody here. They're both good. They're both different. Yeah, I think I love, this is going to sound weird, but I love accounting. And so I think, I like the digital CPA one a bit more because I think it's accountants for accountants. It's a bit more like about like practice management, like best practices. The mortgage one's really good, but it's very like, it's a lot of information, which is great, but it's a little bit less like, it's just more like industry topics and like not so much like how to do things. It's a bit more of like an industry, what's the right word? Like fireside chat, kind of catch up on like industry outlook, which is super, super interesting. But yeah, I find that I think the connections and just the content and probably more would look forward to more with the digital CPA one. If I had to choose between the 2, I'd love to go to both. But again, I think they're right at the same time, or even if they're like back to back, I probably wouldn't be able to do both of them just with work and, family priorities and stuff like that. So yeah, but it's, I'm trying to see if we can go. Obviously Denver in December, I'm not a snow person, so I don't, we'll see. But yeah, the Phoenix one might be the one we end up doing. So
yeah, the mobile conferences that I went to, a lot of them were very much getting a pulse on all these companies and their kind of best practices. For Laracon and the PHP and Laravel community, that one doesn't really draw a ton of large companies, so it's much more community driven, which I really like. Lots of people on
Hmm.
Twitter. They have this pretty solid community of people that help out, share free content. Yes, there's paid content, but lots of it makes sense in the right ways. And so when coming to Laracon, compared to the mobile conferences is like, hey, what is Twitter doing? What is Facebook doing? What are all these companies that are kind of like showing their best foot at these coding conferences to kind of catch you, like keep you up to date on large scale mobile app problems? Whereas Laracon, it's much more community member driven, lots more passion instead of kind of profit in companies. I think that twist on it, when I asked about who has the better community, I can really feel that at Laracon, where people are just there to have a good time. Like, yes, the talks are important, but I think it's really connecting with one another. Where I think the mobile conferences that I previously went to is like recruiting, making the company look good, trying to find your next job. I don't feel that as much in the Laravel conference at Laracon, but yeah, it definitely depends on what your goals are. Like, I'm just trying to network and learn a few things, but primarily network.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes a big difference. And, for me, I guess with the two conferences I'm thinking about, I was just going to go like on my own as myself and not really affiliated with my company. And that does bring a different dynamic than like if you're going like as part of your company or like, kind of not sponsored, but you know what I mean? Kind of like you're going relevant to your role to kind of go and get information. And, I'm curious, you just mentioned that you sign an offer. And so you're sunsetting the kind of, sorry, word like solopreneur lifestyle right now. And so I'm curious how you think or how it's been for you where you've gone to conferences in the past through your prior roles like Meta or PayPal versus like Laracon. Is Laracon the only one that you've been to where you were kind of doing the solopreneur thing, or have you been to others as well during that time?
Yeah, I think it was just that one
Okay.
twice, this year and last year. The other ones where I go on the company dime, definitely fun, but different. Like, I already have a community. I don't feel the need to network as much. I'm also not paying the bill for, the
Hmm.
flight, the hotel, the food. Whereas when you pay with it out of your own pocket, you want to get the maximum value. You set a few goals, I think, that are a bit more stricter than going on the company's dime. So it's a different vibe and a different mindset. I think a bit more taxing because you have to spend a lot more effort to do that networking. If you're not a social guy, it's can put you out of your comfort zone, which can be a little challenging, especially when you like need to enter these groups of 5 or 10 people in a conversation. There's like good methods and bad methods. There's like lines of talking to people, but overall,
Hmm.
definitely a really fun time. I think going on the company's dime is also fantastic because you can share that knowledge back to the company, and that's a huge value add. That one, you're interested in; two, you're able to kind of summarize and distill that info. But if you do it for yourself, you're learning in real time. You're applying these connections that might have a bit more of a future payoff. I don't really know when these connections will play out, and I don't make these connections for the sake of them being worth anything. It's more just they're doing cool stuff. I want to talk to them. When I approach people, it's like sometimes it's, hey, you're a familiar face, like, what is your name again? Or it's like, I know they don't know me at all, so I introduce myself, but had a mix of that at Laracon where, you know, talking to people that are more known in the community, like it was a 50-50 shot if they remembered me, which doesn't offend me at all because I'm sure they talk to
Yeah.
a ton of people, but that 50-50 was better than 0% and the last Laracon where I was a bit more of a nobody. Again, it's not my claim to fame to rise within the Laravel community, but it's nice to put myself out there and kind of get recognized, at least to a small degree. And
Hmm.
so that was like a nice win on my belt to be, kind of knowing more people and being more in there with the people that I think have great ideas and are doing cool stuff.
Yeah. That's cool. You mentioned there's a few of like you think you said you called it like a small circle or small community that you met with or like really looking forward to meeting with. You want to name drop or no? You don't have to.
I probably won't name drop because I'll
That's fine.
forget, but there's definitely great conversations where it depends on how busy that person was, but it kind of went into my life, my decisions. I think the conversations I had at the time, usually when I approach these are, what's going on in your life, what's exciting you, and then kind of on the flip side, what I'm up to. And at that point was doing the job search to kind of outline with a few folks of what I'm working with, what my decision making looks like. And I connected with them after I left the conference, said, hey, it's great chatting with you, kind of outlined a few key points of our conversation in case they forgot. And then they're
Yeah.
like, oh, it's nice to connect with you and, excited to see where your job search ends up. So it's just like a really nice group of people where I think at this Laracon, it being a 2-day event, they invited more JavaScript people. And I wasn't sure how that would end up given the PHP and JavaScript communities are just different goals, different VC funding amounts. It's just a different vibe. and it actually turned out to go pretty well. They had a basketball game at the Laracon event. So the day before the conference, it was a basketball game with people who don't play basketball, of course, coders. I mean, maybe some did, but the majority is just, sitting at their desk working on code. And so I think it was Laravel people versus the JavaScript people. And it was hosted by Sentry, like an error monitoring tool. But it was a funny event. I caught a few minutes of the live stream where, I don't know, you just don't really see these kind of spur of the moment, stupid, funny, kind of lighthearted events. And so I asked a few people that were involved in it the day after the conference and said, hey, how was the basketball event? They're like, oh, it was fun. Like, some people tried really hard, but like not in a bad way. It was just kind of a fun event to bring people together. So I think bringing the JavaScript people added a little bit of a spice to the community where people are like, how is this going to react? What is it going to look like? And at the end of the day, it turned out really well. I think the JavaScript people and Twitter have a bit of a polarizing view and have kind of like hot takes, so it feels like on the regular, where on Laravel, it's much more calm, casual. I'm sure there are some hot takes, but it's not as frequent. It doesn't feel as attention grabby as the JavaScript folks. And I think I was curious how they would act in person, because again, it's a way different measure trying to get engagement online and, try to win against the algorithm versus just having a one-to-one conversation. And I didn't talk to them specifically, but from the people I talked to and I asked about them, they said they're all great. So pretty cool to kind of expand the community, bring more people in. One kind of interesting fact that I realized was during the Laravel conference on day one, Taylor had asked at the final talk, he gave the final talk on day one. He said, raise your hand if this is your first Laracon. And I was sitting like in the back of this first section, and there were so many hands that came up where I was shocked, because I'd also felt when you get to these large conferences, like, do I know these people? Like, kind of navigating through a sea of heads. And I had realized there's definitely a lot of people I didn't know. And then seeing the hands pop up where it was their first Laracon, I was like, okay, the community is growing rapidly. And I think it's only going to continue. Like the small Laracons of maybe, I don't know, 2016 to 2019 aren't going to be a thing anymore. Now they need to kind of expand the size and focus on newcomers where, people are less known in the community, trying to make those connections. And yeah, it was just kind of an interesting evolution. I thought it'd be a lot more of like the original people. And I think they were still there, but the doors were open to a lot of new people, which is always great.
Yeah. It's cool. Sounds like a fun time. What was the big, if you could summarize, like what was like the big one or two, like did they do any like new releases or like exciting developments? Like what was the presentation that really grabbed your interest the most?
Yeah, there was two talks that I really liked. I mean, I don't want to say I didn't like the others. I liked all of them. I think two that stood out. Taylor gave a talk at the end of day one announcing Laravel Cloud. And so if you've heard of Next.js, kind of the JavaScript framework that's built on top of React, they have a platform called Vercel. That platform allows you to deploy the JavaScript like web app super easily. And Laravel has two offerings to deploy your PHP app. One is the Laravel Forge, where you bring a VPS, virtual private server. It can do all that for you using your given server. There's Laravel Vapor, which is a serverless solution that's built off Amazon's serverless infrastructure. And then now they announced a third option, which is Laravel Cloud, which kind of sits what I imagine in the middle of those two layers. Laravel Forge is kind of more hands-on, so you have to do a bit more work. Laravel Vapor is a bit more hands-off, kind of bring your own, or they build your own infrastructure on Amazon. I think Laravel Cloud is approachable from every developer's point of view, where you can just take your Laravel project, bring it to their new product, Laravel Cloud, get it up and running, control a few things, but you don't have to worry about the underlying server that it's running on. So they're trying to make things like super easy to deploy and get it out there, which I thought was already easy. So it's not like I see it as a huge opportunity, but I think they have a different business sense on what that looks like. So that was a major release. I think it was met with a little bit of criticism to understand how that would fit, given they have two pretty solid product offerings in that area already. But I think people are excited because they've done historically pretty well. So I think they know what they're doing. The second talk that I liked was from a guy, Daniel Colborn, a little bit of like a technical talk, but he had described something called verbs. And the consensus, or kind of to sum up his talk, was he had a project where people could upvote and downvote certain other people in this game that he had created. So he created a game for Laracon that participants could come and upvote and downvote other players. If you were at the top of the list, you won like $2,000 in cash. Like they came to the conference with a bag of cash. Maybe it was like 10 grand. It was this massive bag. They had posted photos on Twitter saying it's hard to get through TSA, having $10,000 in $1 bills. And
Hmm.
so they had created this game to demonstrate his like verbs architecture. And what that is it's capturing what happens in your app and then deriving state from that. So you can think of
Mm.
two paradigms. One is like Brad upvoted Ben, or Ben like downvoted Brad as like an action. Based on those actions, we'd have like an upvote count and a downvote count, or maybe just like an overall count, like a +1, -1 for an upvote and a downvote. And so we could store that final count, which is maybe like +20 or -10. What he describes is storing the actual action. So I'll store the action that I upvoted you, and I'm storing the action that you downvoted me. From that, we can derive the final state of like the database or the game based on looping from start to finish and kind of writing logic for all those actions. And the reason why that's important is because he intentionally put a bug in his code for the game saying that you could actually upvote people multiple times when you shouldn't be able to. And
Hmm.
so the state of the game is maybe I have 10 points, but 5 of those are fake. And so he had a bug fix in his game intentionally that says, I'm going to go look through all these actions that were like a logged history of actions and filter out these like malicious actions that had a bug. Either it's a malicious action from the user or it's just a bug in the code. Then once he fixed that code, he like reran his script, which looked at all the actions, kind of like discarded the invalid ones, and then drove the state of the game. And
Hmm.
so maybe that wasn't as short as I wanted it to be, but what he's trying to kind of encapsulate is that not storing the final state, but kind of storing the action such that if you can replay this history of events and you change your
Hmm.
code, you're in a state where things are a little bit easier to fix because you're always going to have a bug here or there. And if you can't trace it back to where things went wrong and how to fix it, it makes it really hard to develop an application. And so, yeah, his whole talk was like store the actions, derive the state. That works
Hmm.
out really well because if you have a bug, you can come back and fix things. And now you can just discard like invalid verbs or actions that you don't consider valid anymore. But if you store like the derived state without storing the actions, we wouldn't be able to know how to remove these like invalid votes after we have this final count. So
Yeah,
those are the two that I like the best.
that's cool. It almost sounds like I'm simplifying it a crap ton, I'm sure, but it almost sounds like just storing like really like detailed like logs almost. Like, you have
Mm-hmm.
logs that kind of show the actions, and it sounds like he's basically storing that and using it in a useful way. So sounds
Yeah,
cool.
I think there's like metadata to like IP address. So if there's like a bad actor, they can filter out like replay all from start to end,
Hmm.
excluding this IP or etc. So yeah, pretty cool system. He's not the first one to coin it, but I think he's developing a Laravel package that makes it easier to pull this off in large scale applications. So I think that was kind of his introduction to the architecture at large, and then his package on how that works.
Yeah. Okay, that's cool. Very
Yeah.
cool. Well, glad you had a good time at the conference, and I'm sure you'll be back to other ones. It seems like
Oh yeah.
sounds like a coding ambassador is in your future. Maybe, who knows?
I would like to give a talk one day. Don't know
Yeah,
when, but it's coming.
yeah, for sure. Cool. So I have a couple things going on in my world. I was gonna just bring up to speed and maybe just complain about, if nothing else. So I made a error on my CPA license. So I am licensed originally from California because that's where I'm from and that's where Brad currently resides. Moved to Arizona a number of years ago, and so I transferred my CPA license over to Arizona. And basically, I thought, and this is just my own lack of reading, so no one to blame but myself. I thought if I just kept my license active in California, it would like reciprocate in Arizona. And so when the renewal came up, just by pure nature of California sending me the renewal letter in the mail first, I just said, okay, I'll just renew that. I still, go to California all the time. Who knows where the future leads. And so I'll just keep that active. And so I was like, okay, I'll pay the $350 and do all the like continuing education stuff you have to do for that. And then Arizona is probably going to just reciprocate it. But then, like a month later, I get the letter from Arizona saying, "Hey, you need to renew your CPA license with Arizona," and like basically said in the letter, like, if you're a resident and like you live in Arizona and you work in Arizona, like you need to register in Arizona. You cannot like reciprocate from
So
another
you have
state.
both then.
Yeah, so I had to pay $650 instead of just $350 for
Oof.
just the same things. Lesson learned, such as the nature of state, regulatory licenses. Sometimes it's not very flexible. The DMV has never been known to be flexible, and the Board of Accountancy is no different. But yeah, I just went through all that rigmarole this week of like getting the Arizona package ready to mail off, and then I got to mail a check for 300 bones over to them. Yeah, that was a fun moment for sure. I was just like, damn, I was going to call them and plead my case, but it says in black and white ink, can't do it.
Yeah, we
So
don't have any certifications over here, so come over here and you can have an arts degree, you can have whatever degree, no degree, boot camp, get a
yeah,
job, no certifications.
a
Small
true
pitch right there.
a true meritocracy. Yeah, I know. It's interesting because accounting. I think a lot of people that are accounting professionals who potentially listen to this, you feel pressured by like industry standards and norms to get your CPA license, even though I don't do anything in public accounting, and I haven't since 2016, really. Yeah, 2016. So but you still feel, and you're kind of like subtly told to like keep it active, and it's great, and it is great for your resume because it is a really difficult designation to get, but it's a weird one because you're kind of told to keep it around. It's really good for you, but like if you lose it, there's no reason you need to keep it active other than just to keep it on your resume and your cover letter. So
Do you have to set a calendar reminder for that, or I mean, they
you get
send you a mail?
Yeah, you get letters saying, "Hey, you got to do 40 hours or 80 hours of continuing education for each like 2-year period. Depends on your state, of course." And so, keeping up with that throughout the year is better than like waiting till the very end and doing
Hmm.
80 hours of CPE in 5 hours. That doesn't make sense, but self study lets you do that. But yeah, so they kind of keep you honest with it throughout the year. But it's just something that I think fortunately, where I work now and places I've worked before, if you are in an accounting org where there is a lot of CPAs like that just work there, then a lot of times they will try and do like company hosted like events where you can get credits. So that way you're not
Mm.
doing a bunch of learning, outside of work. You can kind of, learn something at work that's relevant to your topic, and then it gives you credit for, your license. And so they've been doing, where I work, they've been doing that for the last like year and a half now. And it's actually been super helpful because it just makes it easier to get the credits at the end of the year. So yeah, that was something that's been going on. The other thing that I've been kicking around was I was showing you this book before we got started here, is the Fundamentals to Data Engineering. Hopefully I
Gotta
didn't cover
love an
my mic
O'Reilly
there.
book.
O'Reilly, yeah, they get you bad. And so basically the backstory on this, I don't plan to like know everything in that book. Okay. But the real reason, and we've talked about this a little bit on the pod, is the emphasis on like using modern tools and technology to like solve the accounting problem for companies. And I've said before that, basically a lot of accounting, not all of it, but of a lot of accounting, especially at like larger companies that have like different systems, like maybe you have Stripe, maybe you have, like NetSuite as like a general ledger system. You have all these different systems. And a lot of accounting these days is moving data from that system, doing a little bit of manipulation, and then putting it into your general ledger, into your financials, which at the end of the day, if you boil it down, is like a data engineering problem at the end of the day.
Hmm.
Right now, accountants are very human involved, manually involved in that, where we take it from the system, do the manipulation in Excel or Google Sheet, and then upload it into the next system. And so it's my strong belief, and this is not unique to me. This is it's popular, but not as popular as it probably should be. But it's gaining traction. Is that there is better ways to do that, and in my opinion, data engineering, that whole process of like extract, transform, load, is exactly where I think that's going to head. At least a big part of it. And so so I got this book. It's a pretty light book. I'm actually a couple of chapters in already. I got it the other day. You probably can't tell how thick it is. Yeah, it's not very thick.
My
It's more
guess
like a
is 190 pages.
no, way off, dude. Way off.
Yeah, yeah, I don't read. I'm a digital guy.
Yeah, it's like 400 pages.
Really? Okay.
Yeah,
There you
but
go.
yeah, it goes into some good stuff. I think. Let's see if I can find a couple of things, the chapters I like highlighted to go into.
Are you a
Uh,
bookmark kind of guy, or do you take notes on the side? What's your kind of thought process on approaching that?
yeah, I do take notes and I highlight a lot. So, like APIs, I highlight stuff on APIs and like transaction databases and stuff like that. So, yeah, like let me show you. I don't have good ones in this one, but in this book, there's another book I'm reading. You actually can see my bookmark here. There you
Hmm.
go. And my wife makes the bookmark. That's why it's got the pink fluff on top. So this book is building a story brand. So it's about like marketing, and I think personally, maybe it's just the accountant brain in me that marketing is like, to me, seems like the hardest part about running a business. Like,
Hmm.
and you can probably relate to this too. Like, you might build an amazing product, you might offer an amazing service, but if no one finds it, it doesn't matter. No one
Yeah.
cares. And so, like, marketing, something that I realize is probably a blind spot for me. And just, I had like one marketing class in college, and then I knew I wasn't going to be a marketing major, so I just did what I needed to do and moved on. And so,
It's
definitely a
funny you
blind
say
spot.
that. Yeah, because when I was at Laracon, I had described the journey of me working at companies, then starting my own thing. And surprisingly enough, there's a lot of people in that camp that, were at a company that did freelance and then started to do their own thing. And the common theme that I had told people that I struggled with was marketing, and the resonation on the other side of engineer to engineer talking about the success of their business and their products boils down to effective marketing and,
Hmm.
product placement and all these little things that you think are an afterthought. But once you get in the trenches, you built out this cool product. If you haven't thought about it, it really comes to hit you on the head and just say,
Hmm.
how are you going to pull through this? Because so many people that I talked to kind of ping pong back and forth, said, I got enough money from this job for me to go start my own venture. Didn't go as well as I wanted, so I hopped back to a job. And
Hmm.
I've only worked at companies, and this is my first venture, doing things on my own. That I have signed a job offer, so we'll be starting shortly. But, it could be something in my future that I do go back and forth on. It sounds a little bit unstable to go so often, and I think the more responsibility and dependencies I have, it makes it less likely. But
Hmm.
I applauded everybody that, told me their story, said they were fighting, and I think they recommended a few different marketing books. I don't remember them off the top of my head. I think there's the SaaS Playbook from
Hmm.
Rob Walling that was more or less modeled after a different book. I can't remember the name, but it was like 16 ways or 30 ways how to market things, or different strategies that you could apply to your product to see if it worked out for you. And I thought, if I had that book, when things were starting for Split My Expenses or Chatty Butler, products that I think are built correctly but might not have the perfect marketing plan. And when I say perfect marketing plan, there was never a marketing plan, so that's probably the first step that I didn't do super well on. But I think these books highlight things that you never think of and give you like the first step into that journey. So you
Hmm.
talking about doing the marketing book makes so much sense. I think it's one of those things you don't want to say you're not good at, because you kind of, the when you say that, it speaks it into existence. And so
Hmm.
as I built these apps and websites, I thought, oh, I'll get to it later. But really, when I stopped and think about it or thought about it, I was like, yeah, I'm just not good at this. And I hate to say I'm not good at something, because I'm always trying to be good at stuff. And
Hmm.
marketing, since I spent no effort, didn't prioritize it, I suck at it. And I'm happy to say that now, although it's a sad fact when I was deeper in the trenches.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting too, because I feel like marketing, you know, the more I understand it now, and I guess reading this book, and I have another book, I grabbed another book here that I'm reading. It's called The Accountant Marketer. So marketing like for accounting professionals.
You got to write one of those.
Uh, yeah, I know. Yeah, that's a good point. We'll talk about that later. But basically, it seems to me like a lot of marketing is like compounding. Like, you kind of, you can buy leads and you can buy like Facebook ads, and that might get you some traction. But in reading both these books, and they both have different philosophies, they're not related. They're just books about marketing. One's very general. The Building a Story Brand is a pretty general book. And then the other one is very specific to accountants, of course. But both of them kind of describe in a way of just like this, you have to kind of compound. You have to kind of do it for a while, be consistent and be patient. Like, you don't go viral overnight in most cases. Now, some people do, of course, but like the 99% of the population of products or services, they don't go viral, and it just takes time and, consistency, and then also the right message too. But yeah, I'm a big fan of reading books and trying to like use those to get better, like just for my own personal self. The one thing, it's funny, there's some classic books, right? Like the Seven Habits of Highly Effective People. I'm
Hmm.
sure you've heard of that one.
How to win friends and
There's,
influence people,
yeah, I have that
right?
one. But there's certain ones like the Seven Habits. There's a few other ones, or Atomic Habits is a good one too, by
Hmm.
James Clear. When I read those books, it'll be like, go do something, like, kind of put this into play, like, and it gets you all motivated, and you're like, I got to stop reading, I got to go do this. And so I get through very little of the books, because I'm like, wait, this isn't effective, like, I need to go do this, like, yeah, it's then it kind of stresses me out. I'm like, I'm not doing this, I got to go do this right now. And so, like, some of those books, honestly, they're great books, but I got to like take a chill pill when I read them sometimes, because
Yeah, the compounding effect, I think, in your head makes so much sense. But to be able to be that consistent is so hard. Like diet,
Hmm.
exercise, like improving on anything, could be stretching, whatever.
Yeah.
It makes sense to do like a little bit every day, even building a business, like a little bit every day. But
Hmm.
once you slip up on one day, maybe I won't do it the next day. It's like so hard to make that a habit. I think it's easy on paper and it gets you excited when you read those books, but really pulling that off, like the 75 hard challenge or these challenges that
Hmm.
really hold you to your commitments at a long duration. Those are so hard. I've never done one, but I can only imagine like the mental fortitude it takes to set those goals, go hard on them for, many months and then see that payoff. 'Cause I'm sure once you got there, if things worked out, you would be in a good spot. I think when I
Hmm.
started my marketing efforts for Split My Expenses, I told myself like, hey, February is going to be the month of marketing. And I think I spent maybe like 2 days on it, writing a few blog posts, researching stuff. And I was so not excited about it in a way that was like, hey, I'm doing my own business. I want to have fun and do things I like. Yet I'm sitting
Hmm.
here looking at marketing like a giant elephant in the room that's going to make my life hell. And I think I had substituted the happiness of my day to day work with like the success of the business, which can work on the short term, but doesn't work on the long term, where, this is something you have to do, although not exciting. You can't put it off forever. And so I think I probably spent, I don't know, a week max working on things. And at the end of that, I was both disappointed in myself and also just frustrated at not really understanding the results of marketing, because it's something you put in that effort, but you don't see till later. And that
Hmm.
later could be months. It could be, super long tail efforts. When I'm coding something, I can build it, test it, deploy it all within a day or a week. And I know there's value added there. But the marketing side, that was really hard to wrap my head around because I don't have the skills. I don't really evaluate things that well in terms of if I wrote a new blog post, am I getting more users? Am I getting more paid users? It didn't feel as connected to the core business metrics, and probably could have done a better job there. But the mental disconnect of me putting an effort and seeing a result and the marketing side of things felt really off. And I didn't really love that.
Yeah. Well, it's almost like you could hire out to do those kinds of things. Like if you really
Hmm.
say, I do not find any enjoyment out of this, like this actually stresses me out. I hate this, as a matter of fact, then that's a good thing to like hire out. But then of course you need to pay someone for, and
Hmm.
a lot of businesses, especially when they're starting, don't have that cash to do that. But yeah, I'm curious to hear. So another book that I have like on my reading list, I haven't started it yet, but I listened to a podcast where the author was talking about the book, and it's a very popular book. It's called Company of One, I think is what it's called, and it's by Paul Jarvis, I want to say, and I'll link it in the show notes here if I get anything wrong. But basically, it's about this person who was working in corporate. He might have been a marketing person, actually. Now that if I remember correctly, he was like working in a corporate environment, and he just wasn't his lifestyle that he wanted, and so he left and started his own business, but was very intentional about like not growing it beyond a certain amount to where like it would stress him out. So basically, like not having employees, just keeping it, at like a meaningful number of revenue for him to be able to live off of with his family, but like not be obsessed with growing it. And it's interesting to hear that kind of thought because again, a lot of companies and startup companies, of course, want to grow, grow, grow. They want to get a nice valuation. If you want to sell and get a nice $1 million exit, great. Or if you just want to, there's no ceiling on your income when you have your own business, so you can just keep growing, growing, growing. But it's interesting to hear him talk about that being like an intentional like frame of mind or like a point of view when he was building his business to not like do that and not let that consume him. And I'm curious, so as you were kind of going up doing the solopreneur journey, had you thought about like lifestyle at all? Were you just like, I just want to make products and like this is my only like thought process at the moment?
Yeah, I definitely thought about it. I think the VC funding route is a different life and it doesn't fit with a company of one approach of lifestyle business. It's kind of the VC funding is you have a large bet, it's B2B, lots of opportunity, lots of obstacles that you could make a ton of money, like the Ubers, the Airbnbs of the world, where, there's a large market. When I was building the stuff that I was building, I realized these aren't VC funded ideas. So I could either pivot and choose one that would fall under that category and try to find interest there, or keep doing what I'm doing, understanding that the market is smaller, the impact can be less, but I can have a great product in a smaller niche area. So I think I thought about, going this larger company route, but I really wanted to see what things would look like if I kept it within my reins and only built stuff by myself without having external pressure. I had the internal pressure. I wanted to build cool stuff. I didn't need extra pressure. And I think at the end of the day, when it came down to finances, if things worked out, I'd be well off on my lifestyle business, which is, non-VC funded. I didn't need the big hit. I think the folks that go the VC route are looking to have more fame and notoriety. And I think some ideas lend themselves to that. So it's not 100% that. But I could care less if nobody knew my name, but they loved my product and tons of people used it. That's where I found the joy and the value versus being like, oh, Bradley just raised 5 million in a Series A. Here's like a photo of me in a leather jacket with my two co-founders, in the San Francisco vibe. Don't really care about that. I think it could be fun, but it's not, I don't look up to that saying that's where I want to be. So I was very much with the products that I had. I knew the opportunity scope was limited to not fit in that. So could I have an idea that could fit in it? Maybe and likely, but I wanted to see what things look like. And talking about Company of One, I was just Googling while you're mentioning it. Paul Jarvis was like, I know that name from somewhere. And he is the co-founder of Fathom Analytics. So shout out to them. It's Jack Ellis and Paul Jarvis. They created a Google Analytics alternative because Google Analytics sucks. And I think GA4, which came out a few months ago, made collecting data and working with the data really hard. And Fathom Analytics is like a easier analytics platform that these folks had built together. And they have their own podcast. I think it's called like Above Board that they do multiple episodes on. So yeah, when you had mentioned that, I was like, Paul Jarvis, it's a very unique name. So I got to see if it's the Paul Jarvis that I had seen on Twitter and on Fathom. And so I Googled Paul Jarvis Fathom, landed on the page and says, hey, he's also the author of Company of One. So I was like, oh, cool. So yeah, quick shout out to them. I think they're a cool company. If you're looking for analytics in the indie space, I think it's like $15 a month for a decently large package. If you have to pay more than that, you're probably doing well already. So it shouldn't really matter. But yeah, it makes sense because from the Twitter conversations that Jack has, the co-founder of Fathom, with Paul, it really seems like they're trying to keep it to just themselves and build out a small team that makes great revenue and profit and building in public too. Their CTO or co-founder, Jack, does a bunch of cool stuff in public with Laravel.
Yeah. That's crazy. I didn't know that. And at first I was going to be like, I feel betrayed because if Fathom Analytics is a company of more than one, I feel betrayed, Paul, but it sounds like they're keeping it small. So I guess we can give them a pass on that. But yeah, that's a small world.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's interesting because I think, again, getting to that like growth and when people leave their jobs, it's like they want to just make up what they were making. I'm sure that was probably the case for you, but then also, want to go further and be more successful. But, it's interesting hearing people who, especially if people who leave for like the lifestyle reason, and it's always, I always hope, and I've seen this on LinkedIn and in my own network of people doing that, and you always cheer for them because usually if it's, for a lifestyle reason, that's the most important thing at the end of the day. People are happy and content and fulfilled. And so you always want to see people in that being successful in that kind of pursuit for sure.
Yeah, the trend I've seen recently on LinkedIn has been insane. Like VPs leaving to start their own thing, engineers leaving across the board. I've seen so many different engineering levels or even non-engineering roles really starting their own companies. I don't think I was early because people have been starting forever, but I think the wave of folks that, if you see a coworker leave and start their own company, you're like, oh, that can become more of a reality for me. Like it's not that far off. And I think it's kind of cascaded to an effect where lots and lots of people are doing it. I think Gen AI is ripe and all these new models are coming out that people feel really empowered and excited about building. Then seeing the people next to them making that leap of faith gives kind of that ammunition to say, oh, it's possible for me too. So yeah, every month maybe on LinkedIn, I'll see a post that pops up on my feed that, XYZ is starting their company. I take a look at their profile. They're at big tech or other, known tech companies. And I'm sitting there like, that's awesome because when I started my career in 2017, I don't think I saw that as much. People were very happy with like, I'm going to go retire at Facebook or Google, not do, anything crazy. And I think people now are taking that risk to go try something out because there's not an AI revolution every so often. This feels like a unique moment. And I think people are capitalizing on that. And yeah, like for me, I'm going back to a corporate life and I had tried my best to get there. I don't think it's a closed door per se, but it was definitely harder once you get there than what you imagine. But I think bringing that excitement, energy, and opportunity and giving it your 100%, 110%, that's like all you can ask for. So I'm kind of following along silently as a follower for some of these stories and companies and projects. And I don't know, it's just cool. It's cool to see that energy, and I think I'm really happy for all these other people that are doing that, because it's not a small decision. It really changes a lot of things. But at the same time, like, I found a job 12 months later. You can easily hop back into it if you spend that time to prep for interviews. So
Yeah. Yeah. And at the end of the day, try and maximize your lifestyle and your own happiness, because life can be short for sure.
yeah.
Yeah. Cool. One other thing I've been kind of working on is Camtasia. So I'm not sure if, for those who aren't familiar, Camtasia is like a screen recording, like software and like editor. And honestly, there's a bunch more stuff that I don't know completely what it does. But why I'm bringing it up is because I don't know how to use it, and I'm learning how to use it. So I'm trying to record some more like screen sharing videos of me actually doing some of this like accounting automation stuff with Cursor, actually. So we talked about Cursor last a podcast or two ago. And so I actually started making videos about this, and I was just using Visual Studio because it's my, just preferred text editor, and I was doing it in Python. And so I have a bunch of videos where I've kind of walked through and done these kind of like, okay, here's a script, here's what it does. We're going to show how we can make an Excel file and put it with all this data. And so walking through all that, but then I thought it'd be a great idea, since we've been having these conversations and since the kind of release and adoption of Cursor for me, to like do it in Cursor and basically walk through the script and then say, okay, now we can ask Cursor and like show you how quickly it can be done, even without like needing to understand all the fundamentals. What I think people need to understand, this is true for any skill, but speaking as an accountant who learned some programming, like you don't need to understand all the computer science. You don't need to understand like memory management and all that kind of stuff to be able to build cool things. Like, sure, if you love it and you go deep into that field, you will learn it. But like, you don't need to do that to get started. And so I'm trying to like walk that line in my videos of like, hey, this is like what this is. This is how you can use it. You can use Claude or you can use Cursor to kind of ask it questions, and look, it'll do that code for us. But like, if you want to know like what a tuple is and what like a dictionary is and like the underlying API behind all that, like, there's lots of better videos out there for that. But like, if you want to learn how to like, transfer data from one Excel to the other Excel, I can do that for you. You know what I mean? So been really
And who doesn't
enjoying.
love that? I feel like that's the get stuff done mentality. When I was building web
Yeah.
apps a long time ago, I just was Googling the problem that I had, and I'm hoping with your videos it'll solve the need of, I want to do something in Excel in Python, and like I'm gonna land on Ben's video and watch it. I'm not gonna be bothered by like the memory and all these
Hmm.
technical aspects that, yeah, you can understand and they'll help you in the long term, but you just want to get stuff done. That's the fun
Yeah.
part about programming.
Yeah. Like, there's a distinct part I remember in the video that I was working on where, so in Python, there's a library called SLSX Writer. And in the code using that library, it's like, workbook is a variable called workbook, and you say equals, capital, like you workbook, because it's coming from the library, from the SLSX writer library. So I was kind of, long story short, trying to like explain, well, this is coming from the library, and then it, it's making this object. But I'm like, you know what? That's, if you are interested in that, go look it up, because they can find a better explanation online, surely, or another video that explains like Python libraries. But like, if you want to just get this thing to work and are less concerned with the why immediately, then just keep watching this and we'll go through it. So yeah, walking that fine line. And it actually, one of the was, we have a friend, shout out to Tyler, he had like a real case example of like, he had like one sheet that he had like update once a month or once a quarter with like this other sheet. And he was kind of doing it manually, like VLOOKUPing things from one place to the other. And so went into that, wrote a script that kind of does it all. I did it in Cursor, and I just said, hey, make this better, add some comments, explains like why it does what it does, and go through the steps, and shipped it over to him, and it works. It's amazing. I'm just like, that's a good like sample like walkthrough to do, because that's a very common exercise that people do in Excel. And if we can just show how to do that programmatically, then maybe someone will find it useful.
How many lines of code did that end up being?
I'll tell you, Bradley. Let me see here, we're looking this up
Keep it
live.
minimal. Less is more, folks.
So if I added comments in there, so it's
Okay.
26 lines of code,
With
and
comments.
with comments.
Oh, that's short.
There's 6 steps. Import pandas, the pandas library, read the Excel files. There's 2 Excel files. like merge the Excel files like in code, and then yeah, it's pretty basics. Yeah, excuse
That's
me,
cool.
26 lines of code. Yeah, so yeah, that kind of stuff is just fun. I made like a little README markdown file too that like explains like you have to save the file in a certain spot, and like it's going to be looking at based on the file names, make sure the file names are actually what they say they are in the code. So yeah, there's tools out there that are super powerful, and people have a fear to learn new things, but they need to
Hmm.
shelf that and realize that they're more capable than they probably give themselves credit for. And even if they don't necessarily want to learn it, just like you mentioned with the kind of Gen AI revolution, like now they probably should start learning these things, just because it's going to be quicker than ever to kind of get your skill set outdated if you're not staying on top of something and constantly learning, I think.
Yeah, it's like when I was looking for a job, there's lots of Gen AI like prompt engineering roles, which didn't even exist, a few years ago, at least weren't mainstream. And now you could be a software engineer working on mobile apps, working on web apps, whatever. But now you can be a prompt engineer, and it's this whole study where optimizing what you get out of the AI. So pretty
Hmm.
fascinating, and the pay is great. Like I could see it, people getting really into that and actually making great money with it.
Hmm. Yeah. Similarly, there's been, if you just look on LinkedIn these days, it'll say like there's a lot of jobs called like accounting transformation manager, or accounting system manager, finance transformation manager. And basically it's like this recognition that like these are systems that finance and accounting teams use are getting more complicated, but they're getting more like modern and like web based or cloud based, and like they have APIs and stuff like that. So I think there's in companies across the world, really, there's like a recognition with that role that like, hey, like finance like needs some kind of engineering too, not just traditional software engineering. And even roles like finance, like financial analytics or finance analytics, or like financial engineers, like there's a whole you can kind of go down the rabbit hole of like the finance world, and a lot of companies like needs an update too, or needs a refresh too. And I think you start to see that position. I've seen that position more and more as of late than I probably did 3 or 4 years ago. So it's definitely trending in that direction.
Yeah, it's a good time to get close to AI in any way you can. If it's
Hmm.
on the job, outside the job, like chatting daily with Claude or OpenAI's ChatGPT. I think the more exposure you get to that, the better well suited you are for the changing market that's maybe not coming this year, but it's really getting close. Like OpenAI just
Hmm.
dropped a new model yesterday. Their whole pitch on it was that it has complex reasoning and logic. So
Hmm.
traditionally, you'd have to prompt the AI with a really good prompt. So you have to say, this is a problem that you're looking to tackle, act as this kind of person, think carefully, step by step, recheck your work. So basically, these phrases that would instruct a human to make sure that they're doing things carefully. And OpenAI released their model. I think it's called O1 and O1 Mini. And these models actually flip the script a little bit and say, give me a simple prompt. So, categorize an expense by description, which is something I do on Split My Expenses. Don't dive in deeply on how that's done. The model itself will take your simple task and make sure it produces a high quality output internally. And so I think what they do is they take your prompt, make sure they run through a bunch of layers and filtering to make like a crazy prompt under the hood, and then that gets evaluated in a pretty deeply logical way that gives you really good output. I think the main difference here is cost goes back up, and inference time, so how long it takes for you to get an answer from the AI, is much longer than like the traditional way. So it's mostly used for really complicated logic problems, like, hey, you have three people, one went to the store, one's taller than the other, blah, 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 like these conclusions based on other data. Whereas if you're asking it to do a simple task like categorize an expense, or, categorize something or summarize something, not that complicated, and probably like the GPT-4 model is probably best for that. But I think just exciting times having AI being a focus, and then these companies neck and neck releasing a really cool model, a really cool logic model, a really fast and efficient performance model on the Google side. So the competition is fierce as ever. I think OpenAI came out swinging yesterday and showed up in a big way. And I think every time these announcements come out, it's cool to see that this is only the beginning. I know they say it every time, but truly, whatever they release today has hopefully been under wraps for the past 6 to 12 months. And so we're kind of
Hmm.
getting the previous generation while they train the new one, which is so cool.
Yeah. So one thing that I'm glad you mentioned OpenAI, because I saw something that went kind of semi viral, went viral in my circle on X. Was if you ask OpenAI how many R's are in the word strawberry. Have you seen
Mm,
this?
I have seen it. Yes.
Yeah, okay. It insists that there's only two. And so you can, and like, it will not budge off that, at least in my experience. So, like, I've had like a full on conversation where it's like, okay, spell all the letters of strawberry, and it'll go through and it'll say the three R's. And so you say, okay, how many R's are in strawberry? And it says two. And it's like, no, you literally just spelled out three. So it's just funny. I mean, it's still undoubtedly a super powerful technology, and it's not going anywhere. It's going to be becoming more and more prevalent, of course, but stuff like that, you go, what the heck? Like, how does it even? How could that trip it up? You know what I mean? Like, how could that trip it up among all the other incredible things it can do? You know?
Yeah, I think the consensus there was that it takes your text that you type in and then it tokenizes it, so it takes like three or more characters and like chunks it up.
Hmm.
That then goes into the raw model as like numbers or vectors or integers, and it outputs the answer. I think the tokenizer is a big system component to the LLM, and that strawberry query like
Hmm.
highlights the tokenizer's kind of internals in a way that as a human, when you look at it, clearly there's three, but the tokenizer reads it as two. And so there's certain questions, like you mentioned, that each new model release, people are kind of throwing these questions that should be easy but aren't, to see
Yeah.
the intelligence upgrade over time. And I think there was a model that came out from this guy maybe 2 weeks ago, and it answered it correctly. And that was kind of the flag to say, oh my God, this model is better. Like, what are they doing that they can answer, three R's in strawberry on the first go,
Hmm.
And it's just funny that these things exist because I would never think of them, but somewhere someone came up with these, very specific prompts that pry at the underlying knowledge and data and storage and mechanisms that give you the weak spots of the LLM. And then as these LLMs improve, like, do those weak spots exist by just retrying that query on each generation? So yeah, there's a
Hmm.
few of those out there that I've seen that are very interesting to look at.
Yeah. Yeah. That's interesting. The tokenization thing, because I'm not a technical person. So I was like, how does that work? But it's interesting to hear the actual, like, under the hood theory about what's going on like the tech side of why it's doing that.
Yeah, I don't know if it's 100%. That's just what I've heard.
Yeah.
Again, I'm more of an application developer, but I do try to dig in, where I see fit. But that's kind of the
Hmm.
theory, I guess. And there was different models that came out from folks, and each company has its own tokenizer. So if someone has a model, say based on Claude, for Anthropic, or based on OpenAI, you can kind of understand the responses based on the tokenizer. And so those certain queries give you access to what the tokenizer behaves like. So if you're given some random model, you can ask it the strawberry question. If it doesn't get it right, maybe it's not Claude, or maybe it's not OpenAI. So like there's certain questions that give you a deeper insight in the tokenizer. And each of the
Hmm.
companies have a different one, such that you're able to kind of get a feeling for where this model might exist. Because we talked about it a while ago, but there's LMSys, this leaderboard where they rank LLM outputs.
Yeah.
And what companies have been doing now, OpenAI in specific, and even Google, have been putting these new models into this arena, and they don't name them. They give them GPT-2 unnamed chatbot. And so anyone could upload it with any name, and these models are scoring really well in these benchmarks. And people are saying, who is this? Like, is this Google? Is this Facebook? Is this OpenAI? Who put this out there? And then, the companies come out after 2 to 3 weeks and say, hey, it was us. We tested it for 3 weeks in the arena and it scored highly, and here's our data. But I
Hmm.
think what people try to do in the meantime is ask it these specific queries to say, is this OpenAI because their tokenizer acts this way? Is this Google, et cetera? And so, yeah, it's kind of interesting seeing people go deep in the weeds to get this extra data or information out from these models that really isn't supposed to be there. But, as an LLM, you do have raw behaviors and capabilities that can be kind of forced out given the right query. And that's what these people are
Yeah.
doing.
Cool. Very cool. Interesting stuff. Awesome. Well, let's start wrapping this up. I know you had something you wanted to chat about as far as the interview. So why don't you take us
Yeah.
away with that?
Yeah, so if people are still around, hopefully you waited this long. So big news, drumroll please. I accepted a job offer at Snapchat. So I'll be joining in October, end of October. I'll actually be moving back to the Bay Area. Had a short stint down here in Orange County. Moved down to Orange County in January, then actually heading back up to Bay Area, specifically like kind of San Jose area in October. So yeah, it was a wild ride. I'm very very happy I got here. I think the company is definitely an exciting spot to be with really good mobile engineers. So when I started my job search, I really didn't know what I was looking for. I think I say that in both a positive and a negative way. I had started applying to places, from startups with 8 people to, big tech like Meta and Google. As I got through that process, I think if I pull up my stats, give me 1 second, I threw
Yeah,
it through
sure.
Claude saying, hey, here's my interview spreadsheet that I had kept track of. So I named the company, the location, kind of the stage in which I was at, if I got an offer or not, and what that all looked like. I threw it through Claude while we were talking to kind of give me some facts to share with the pod because I thought it would be interesting. And so I'll just kind of give you the high level point. So it told me, which I'm not going to fact check, but it's probably decently correct. I applied to 54 different companies.
Wow.
And 54 is a ton. I've never applied to that many in my whole life. And I think partly it was due to because I'm down in Orange County. There wasn't a bunch of tech down here. So it was remote. It was LA. It was Bay Area. Which, given all those different buckets, allowed me to do a lot. But also at the same time, I didn't know if I wanted a startup. I didn't know if I wanted a mid-sized company. I didn't know if I wanted big techs. That 54, which sounds mind-bogglingly large now that I look at it, came over time. So it's not like I shotgunned immediately, but it was something that I eventually got to. And so I started applying, looks like, let me pull up the doc. June 19th was my first application. So 80 days ago or so. And
Yeah.
I definitely went in waves, like applied to the first wave and maybe, 8 companies, waited to see. The next week kind of went further and further. But yeah, it started a while ago. It's been a long time. Looking at other facts, so Claude pointed out referrals. So on my job application spreadsheet, I usually don't go for referrals because I don't know, I feel some intrinsic value to be like, hey, I cold applied and I got in. I think it's a stupid way to do it when I talk about it out loud, but something in me feels like, oh, I made it, not having to rely on other people. And in this job market, in this day and age, there's less positions, more cost cutting. I think getting that foot in the door through an acquaintance, ex-coworker, friend, family, etc., I would definitely lean on it. So I think I got maybe 8 referrals, and those 8 referrals were to companies that were pretty established and companies that I want to be at. Definitely lean on that. Claude is also pointing out I had a mix of rapid progress and slow progress. And to break that down, I had interviews where I'd apply to the company, maybe June 19th. They would reach out to me June 20th saying, hey, Bradley, let's get you on the phone with a recruiter. I'd go through their full process, maybe in like 2 to 3 weeks, or essentially they were moving really, really fast. On the other hand, it outlines slow progress because I updated my sheet yesterday. There's a company that I applied to in June that reached out to me today or yesterday to set up a recruiter call. So I'd emailed them and said, hey, thanks for reaching out. I have more than wrapped up my job search. I even sent them like a funny dig. I was like, I think you guys might have been the slowest to respond. Everybody in my job search, but I appreciate it. Maybe next time.
Yeah.
And it was just crazy to see the speeds and velocities of like hiring precedents and trying to fill a role, because some companies were on top of it. Like the smaller companies move really fast, and I value that. And the bigger companies were, hiring committee, 15 different approvals, got to go through CTO, CEO, etc., which works out sometimes, but at the end of the day, can be a little bit much. So yeah, rapid progress and slow progress. The next bullet point it outlines is multiple offers. So I think across the 54, around that ballpark, I think I had maybe 8 or 10 offers, which is really good. I'm happy to say that I did a ton of interview prep. I did a ton of interviews that helped me with future interviews. So part of that 54 was becoming familiar and understanding how to do an interview well. And each time you kind of relearn that skill. And so that probably earlier chunk of those interviews, some were more on the practice side, but lots of them were pretty serious and understanding where I wanted to go. So at the end of the day, I had a really good handful of companies, both remote, LA and Bay Area, that I did have offers with.
Nice.
And then, yeah, I have a few more. I'll pause there if you want to jump in.
No.
Okay. Yeah. So another one that Claude kind of pointed out was diverse roles. So again, in my job search of today, it was remote, LA, Bay Area. It was mobile, which we're talking more iOS application side, or web. The third one that I added to the mix was React Native. So I picked up React Native to work on for Split My Expenses to get this mobile app out the door. React Native is important because I get iOS and Android in one code base. So usually when I do my job search, it's iOS only. This time I added web, given I've done a ton of Laravel recently and React Native. So not only across locations, but actual job responsibilities, I included like 2 additional ones. So that gave me even more opportunities. And it was great. I think it was good to do that because it kind of gave me a feeling of what my life would be like if I did more Laravel or did more PHP or did more TypeScript and React Native. And ultimately, I did land at Snapchat with more of a specialized iOS role, which I think is what I'm looking for. But it took me a while to get there.
Mhm.
Then it talked about persistence, which I like this one. Despite facing several rejections, you pursued new opportunities. And to break down the rejections a little bit, applying to 54 spots, getting 10 offers, it sounds like I got slaughtered. Just to be honest, lots of these roles, I had felt like these companies weren't fully hiring at times. So I had applied to roles that were open maybe on LinkedIn for 2 months.
Mhm.
Maybe heard back within a week or two saying, hey, we moved on to other candidates. And to be frank, my other job searches, I was always given at least an interview. I felt like a lot of companies in this round either weren't hiring or didn't see me qualified in a way that made me very confused. Where, I think letting people through the door is the first step. If you fail the interview, that's totally fine. Happens to everybody. But there's a
Mhm.
large chunk that made me scared that this job search was different. And I like how Claude pointed that out, saying, hey, you got rejected a lot. And if I could probably break those down, out of all the rejections, maybe 80, 90, 93% were this role is filled, we're not hiring, or we found a better candidate. All of which it's really hard to say where things went wrong. And so
Yeah.
having a bit of grit and moving through that was really important for this job search. Talking
Mhm.
about the other side, I'm not perfect. I got a lot of great offers, which I'm very fortunate about, and helped me get through the interview process and also make things a little bit difficult in a good way on how to choose. But I did fail interviews. I think off the top of my head, thinking back, probably at least 4 interviews that I failed. Between those 4, which I'm super happy that it was only 4 or around that ballpark, half of those are ones that I went in the interview, was excited and energized, and just things didn't click. Either,
Mhm.
me translating the solution that I had in my head to code didn't work out as I wanted, or having that right solution just wasn't happening that day. And I would get out of those interviews thinking, I didn't like that feeling. I'm sure they didn't like it either. I'm kind of struggling in real time over video to get something to work, and it didn't work. And half of those were, I know I got rejected and that sucks, but that's life. And the other half were, oh, I thought I did pretty well there. I'm pretty sure I'm going to move past it. And then getting that rejection, it was like, oh, did I not read that right? Like, I'm really sure I did well, but for whatever reason, they felt that a better candidate was there, or I didn't perform in the same way that I had thought. Because when you look back on things, you have this kind of warped view. When you're in
Mhm.
the middle of it, you're like stressed trying to get it done. When you look back on it, you're like, did I actually do as well as I thought? So I'd say probably 50% I know I failed and it sucks, but it's okay. And the other 50% was a little bit of a surprise when I got their email rejection of being like, darn, like that sucks.
Mhm.
They're a company I wanted to potentially work at, and getting that rejection was like, I need to study more and do better there. But yeah, that was kind of all the things that Claude had pointed out. I think at the end of the day, had like 8 or 10 offers, from some from big tech, some from startups, some from middle size. When I thought about all the offers that I had, lots of it came down to location, so staying in Orange County or moving to LA or Bay Area. And the other half is, what would my career look like if I joined that company? Would I be more iOS focused? Would I be more web focused? And what is the work life balance? What are the products that I'm working on? And what is the compensation? So those
Mhm.
are probably the main factors. Talking with me and my fiance, it was really hard to understand if location would be kind of the end all be all, because looking at 10 offers, it's hard to slice those, and making a location slice makes my life way easier. Having everything
Mhm.
be equal weighted, while they're not fully equal at the end of the day, like that location piece is really hard.
Mhm.
And I had kind of decided, oh, I'll do remote. Like my starting the job search, I was, hey, I'm going to find a remote job. No ifs, ands, or buts. Like that's my goal. Once I got down to the wire, I was thinking, oh, there's really cool opportunities out here that I just want to go try out, and they're not in Orange County. They're not where I'm at today.
Mhm.
That was a really hard mental obstacle to kind of tell myself. I kind of decided early as I got here, it's not really the case. So what do I do?
Mhm.
Do I give up these good offers that aren't remote? Or do I take a remote offer that's still pretty good? Because to be honest, there was really solid remote offers that I received that, if I didn't get these other ones in the Bay or LA, it might have been a different story.
Mhm.
But having lots of good things to pick from, presented a problem, although a good one. And at the end of the day, super happy. Snapchat, I think, aligns with my goals because they're iOS. They're building some really cool stuff. It's a very specialized team that I'm joining more on the media side of things. So something that I don't have a ton of experience in media, but I think with Gen AI, like being media focused, like generating video, generating images, audio, etc., and also exploring something new on the infrastructure side. I've mostly been on the product side, but done a bunch of infrastructure for mobile apps throughout
Hmm.
my kind of 10 years at LinkedIn and Meta. And I think the team and the culture is really aligned with what I'm looking for, where they're intense and they're focused, but they're not, working weekends or anything crazy like that. So I think it's a good fit. It's hard to say. I've talked to a ton of people throughout each of these companies. I'm really excited, looking forward to it. But yeah, it's been a hell of a few months. Had tons of rejections, landed on something I'm super, super excited about. So I'm more than happy to tell the pod that, what's done is done. I wrapped up my 2024 job search folder on my Mac, put
Hmm.
in like all the details of the offer letter, all these documents, went through kind of the HR process of background check. Everything looks great. No
Hmm.
surprises there. But yeah, kind of lined up to start end of next month. I'll be moving back to the Bay Area, which is a little bit crazy, but for this right opportunity, I think it makes sense. Then yeah, gonna be out there working on some cool stuff in the Snapchat world. So super, super pumped.
Yeah, very cool. Congratulations. It's exciting.
Thank
And
you.
again, probably a huge relief to get it all done and close that book, I'm sure.
Oh yeah, I had to celebrate and probably a few times because it hit me multiple times. Like wow, like I looked at my calendar for the past I don't know 6 weeks and it was on site, interview, and I was used to it at the time. Like I built up the muscle and mental fortitude to get through it. But now looking at my
Hmm.
calendar, I'm like, okay, I got to plan the move. Got a few life events in the works, but looking forward past that, I'm not going to have, crazy booked calendar. I'm going to be in office, meeting with
Hmm.
cool people. So I think I'm kind of getting through that hurdle and seeing the other side is an incredible feeling where, I didn't know how long this job search would last. I think I said, oh, I'd sign an offer and start in August and signed in September and starting in October. So clearly that was way off. But at the end of the day, happy with how things ended up.
Yeah, yeah, very cool. Awesome. All right, well let's wrap this up with our usual bookmark kind of recommendations here. So I'll start, and I have two, but I'll make them fast. So the first one is actually from a paid newsletter that I subscribe to by a doctor, not like an MD, but I think like a PhD. Could be wrong. Sorry, but Dr. Julie Gerner. She has a newsletter called Ultra Successful on Substack, and basically she puts out a bunch of great stuff. But this is just the one I happened to most recently print out and highlight a bunch of stuff here. You can see it's upside down, but so it just talks about. It's called Get Your Fire Back, which is you can probably guess what it's about. It's kind of just about pushing through hurdles like in your life if you have like a roadblock or you know you're just feeling like you need some traction, you can't get past a certain hurdle. And so it was a great read. Talks about like the importance of, let's see some things I highlighted here. Seeing things like the glass half full approach, kind of visualizing things in a certain way is super important and underrated. Doing something physical, like don't neglect getting out there and going
Hmm.
for a jog, a walk, or going to the gym. And then also another one that she had was like adopt a 5-minute rule, which is basically like no matter how busy you are, just spend 5 minutes on that thing that you are really trying to do. Just spend 5 minutes, even if it's you don't get a lot done in that 5 minutes, but just spend
I
five
like
minutes
that
on
one.
it. Yeah, and you'll just little by little you'll make some progress on it. So that was a great one. Again, I'll link it. It's behind a paywall, but I'll link to the Substack, and you can kind of see what she has out there. And then the last one I had was it's actually from a couple weeks ago. It was a short book by a CPA, an accounting firm owner, who she's kind of doing, and I don't know her personally, but just from her LinkedIn posts, kind of doing like a lifestyle accounting business. So her name is Erica Good, I think. And she wrote a book, I think it's called The 15-Hour Accountant. I have to look it up here. I don't want to misspeak to what it is. Yeah, the 15-Hour Accountant. So it's like a short book. It talks about like her journey into starting her own firm, but then kind of like Paul Jarvis, what we had talked about earlier, being like really intentional about, how much time commitment that was for her. And so it was a great read. She was pretty transparent about like the numbers and like how long it took her to get there. So you always are putting yourself out there and being vulnerable when you share, especially numbers. It's like one of the things people really get, guarded for, and I can, totally understand that. But she kind of put it all out there, and it really made a lot of traction, I think, in like the accountant community. And so I'm part of a group, like an online group that, you know, really read that book and had a lot of positive feedback about it. So I'll try and find the link to that book as well. It was on her LinkedIn. I think she just had like a download, and it's again probably like 30-20 pages with some graphs and diagrams in there. So but I just loved how transparent it was and how like just thoughtful people. Again, this kind of goes back to people doing what they want to do, like for their own life and making their life fit them. So it was a really cool read, I think.
That's cool. Nice. Yeah, I'll talk about mine. So mine's from X, like always, and it's from Jonathan Para. And he's talking about mobile app paywalls. And so he created a thread on X outlining the kind of impact surface for mobile apps. So when you think about a mobile app, you're designing these features, pushing them out, iterating on them, but not a ton of people talk about having this paywall and iterating on the paywall. And iterating on a paywall means the design, so how you communicate the value of the features to the user, also how you communicate the pricing, whether there's a trial or not, whether there's a weekly plan, a monthly plan, a yearly plan. So Jonathan works at Superwall. Superwall is a company that gives you a remote configurable paywall. And he had outlined he's on multiple calls a week with tons of important apps, and all these apps are doing price testing. And kind of the TLDR of it is there's no one size fits all, which is a huge bummer. Looking at these things as a mobile app developer myself, it'd be great if I could apply the best practices and move on with my life, so I don't sit there iterating on my paywall for 6 months. Unfortunately, what he told the world in this Twitter thread is that you could probably increase revenue by 30 or 40%, which is huge, but that's going to give you at least 2 months of testing to get to that result. And again, there's no one size fits all. So definitely take a look at it. Highlights what he has found successful, and also what is kind of temporary. There's a few things that work, there's a few things that don't, and then his insights on what is working right now, which again doesn't make it any easier, but at the end of the day, it's kind of on that marketing side. If you spend time to build a great product, but you don't have a marketing and conversion funnel, you got to spend time building that. And I think Jonathan gives you great insights to get you closer to having that maximum revenue from your mobile app.
Mm-hmm. Very cool. We'll check that out. Awesome. All right. Well,
cool.
Good stuff, Brad. Good as always. Happy to get back on. Again, life had been super busy for us, so happy to get back on the podcast train. And yeah, we'll do all our linking in the show notes and everything, and then we'll get this one up there on the socials.
Sounds good.
Awesome. Take it easy, everybody.
Bye.
Hey, hope you liked that episode of the Breakeven Brothers podcast. To find more of our episodes, you can go to breakevenbrothers.com or find us on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or Transistor FM. To connect with Brad, you can go to bradleybernard.com or at bradleybernard on X. And to connect with me, you can go to bennettbernard.com or at the Real Tech CPA on X. You can also find us both on LinkedIn. Thanks. See you next time.